Today, we are talking about the exploitation of children on social media and specifically the impact it has on kids in care. Join us today on Fostering the Future.
Welcome to the Fostering the Future podcast, a show about all things child welfare, dependency, adoption, and foster care. Here are your hosts, veterans in the world of child welfare, Jack and Kat.
We believe that every human has incredible and equal value regardless of what side of the courtroom we sit on. We hope that everyone feels welcome and accepted here on Fostering the Future.
Make sure you follow us on Facebook or Instagram as Fostering the Future Podcast, or check us out on our website at fosteringthefuturepodcast.org.
This is Jack, and I am here with Kat, and we wanted to chat a little bit today about children on social media, foster children on social media, and just the whole balance and nuances of when that becomes exploitation of children to post them on your social media, especially where it pertains to kids in foster care.
I feel like this is kind of a new topic lately because right around now we have kids who have grown up on the internet, reaching the age of adulthood and speaking out about what it's like to grow up on camera. It's crossed my mind, but I haven't thought much about until some recent things have taken place. One is our Brittany Dawn episode and how unfair it is to that baby to be exploited for money. But I have seen in the news and in other places, just in even pop culture, like John and Kate +8 and their kids have reached 18 and they've started speaking out about how difficult the show was for their family and how damaging it was. I know earlier you mentioned Little People, Big Worlds.
Yep.
One of those kids who didn't want to be on camera anymore. And I think those are things like, social media and those reality TV shows like 19 Kids and Counting, The Duggars. Social media was kind of exploding around that same time. And I don't think many people stopped and questioned the impact it has on kids. The reason that we want to talk about it today specifically is because it takes it to another level when you're a foster family. And you're doing that. And there are several foster families that are doing that. And they're making an income. If you think about it, they're kind of making an income on the backs of their foster kids.
Right.
I just have a lot of questions like, where is the line that makes it not okay? What are the red flags that someone would do this? And what should the rules be? And, I think probably most adults would agree that there should be laws to protect children, but they're not there yet.
When we were kids, certainly social media wasn't a thing. And also the other thing that wasn't a thing was reality TV, right? So when you and I were kids, the child stars were like Drew Barrymore, right? People like that.
Classic.
And who were those boys, the two boys that had the same names?
Oh, Corey Feldman and so River Phoenix, Corey Feldman and Corey.
Yes.
There's another Corey.
Yes, the Coreys. Those humans grew up as kids on camera and spoke profusely as they aged about how it affected them to be in the spotlight and how most of them turned to drugs, right?
Corey Haim, by the way.
Yes.
Corey Haim, Corey Feldman.
But also Tori Spelling.
Yes.
Like there's so many people that were like these child stars growing up in Hollywood in the spotlight. Almost all of them have told stories about having to turn to drugs because the pressures were so high. They were in some type of spotlight as a child and were supporting their family financially, and how growing up that way affected them. Moving a few years later, it became reality TV. Little People, Big World, The Duggars, Kate and Jake +8.
Yeah, John and Kate
+8. All of those shows that it involved a family with small children. Maybe they asked their kids if they wanted to do it, but even if their kids were consenting, how much did they understand what they were consenting to?
Can they really consent when they're that young? Because what they're consenting to is a forever digital footprint.
Right.
And maybe we didn't know that 20 years ago. Like, I know when I first started posting pictures of my now 15-year-olds. I posted all kinds of stuff and later went back and took a bunch of it down because I was thinking that child might have a partner someday who looks at my Facebook and they don't want to see pictures of him potty training, you know?
Right.
I never posted pictures of him naked, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to see that stuff. And something recently just happened with another one of my kids. One of their friends got on my YouTube and saw baby videos of that child, and he felt kind of taken advantage of. Like, Mom, can you make that private? Of course I can. And of course I did.
Right.
But like, I felt terrible because, and this is sad to say, I think when we have kids, we feel like they belong to us.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Right.
They're their own people who
Right.
should be able to consent to. And I'm ashamed to say that. That's probably how I looked at it. Like, this
Well,
is,
and I think because you love them so much, you feel like they're a part of you.
Yeah.
And like that you're the person who makes all of their decisions, but also they are their own human. And the decisions that you make that will affect them for the rest of their life, at some point, they need to have a consent to it.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to understand there's certain things we shouldn't do just because they're not able to consent to it. And we shouldn't make that decision for them. I do find it interesting how it like has kind of evolved this whole, and there's a balance of whether it's child exploitation or not, but how that previously existed in Hollywood, which switched to more reality TV type shows with the family, which is now really social media. I feel like we just keep changing mediums
Yes.
and still not getting the point that we need to protect
Exactly.
these babies
Right.
from the world and from having to feel like they don't have privacy.
And right now, there is no law that protects children and their earnings when it comes to social media. I did see that there's a new California law that demands that 15% of a child's earning, if they are a child actor, immediately goes into a trust for the child, and the employer has to set it up. I think that we're getting started, you know?
Right. But we're getting started now on what
Yeah.
affected people when we were kids.
Right.
Where is the protection for the kids these days? How do you even create laws around, like, how do you force a social media program that provides funds in some way? Or sometimes it's like the payments come in the form of sponsorships, and that's really handled at the much more local level. How do you force them
Right.
to do that?
And I don't know the answer to that. Like, I know that there are child labor laws and kids can only work up to a certain amount of time. And there was a recent Teen Vogue article where a girl was interviewed and it was so sad. And she talked about how, like, basically she lived with her boss because her dad was her boss.
Right.
And like, home, this is just my opinion, but home should be safe. Home should be a safe place to fall. Like, if you are sick, if you're having a bad day, if whatever, home should be a place where you can just go and be yourself and take the mask off if you need to. So this individual that was interviewed in Teen Vogue, who they use a fake name, so we don't know who it is, but she assures the writer that if you Google her real name, you'll find pictures of her, videos from her back from when she was a toddler. And she talks about how her family left, her parents both left their jobs when the revenue from YouTube started to come in, and they were able to get a nicer house and nicer car. And she was quoted as saying, "That's not fair that I have to support everyone." She said, "I try not to be resentful, but I kind of am." She said that once she told her dad she didn't want to do it anymore, and he told her that they would have to move out of their nice house and that both parents would have to go back to work, leaving no money for nice things. So basically what she's saying, yeah, she's not even 18, but what she's saying now is that it's so much pressure, and that when she turns 18 and she can move out on her own, that she's considering going no contact with her parents. I know that probably sounds extreme, but I can see it because there's no place to be safe. If your parents aren't safe,
Right.
then where can you be safe?
And I think that that's similar to what happened with one of the children on Little People, Big World. Now, obviously, no one knows what's going on in someone else's house, but I'm pretty sure I read something that he had written that said he had to take space from his family because he didn't like the position that he was put in and just needed to get away from that.
Yeah.
I think the times of my life where I've felt least confident, least feeling safe is when I felt like my parents weren't my safe space.
Yeah.
Right? As you're growing up, even especially in your 20s and even into your 30s, like that safe space still largely comes from your parents. And when you feel like they're not your safe space, it's really hard to find that feeling of safety.
Yeah, that's like a great example because I feel like a lot of people in our age group and older, sometimes younger, our parents, some of them are experiencing some difficulties like dementia. And like I lost someone important to me that was like a parent a few years ago. And I feel like when that happens, you kind of lose your anchor for a little while. Yeah. And we need those anchors in our life to help keep us stable. And until you can re-anchor yourself, it's very destabilizing.
You went with me recently sailing with my dad, right? But one of the things that I really appreciate is how sailing has so much symbolism to like life.
Yeah.
And I think I was even telling you this when we were out sailing with my dad recently. When I was a kid, there was the couch in the main salon, which is that couch in the living room that I was sleeping on. If I was anxious, this is where I would go. I would go into the main salon. I would lay there with my blankie and suck in my thumb and stare at my dad. And I felt like as long as I had my eyes on him, I would know whether we were okay. And if he started getting upset about something, and now as an adult, I'm like, man, like sometimes you're an adult, you just get upset about it. It didn't mean like our lives were in danger. But as a kid, like if my dad got like riled up or we ran aground, as you got to experience with us recently, when his face changed, that's how I told myself whether I was going to be okay or not. And as long as he was like happy and smiling, I felt like everything in my world was okay. And to me, that's like such a symbolism for in my life, like how I have looked to him for that feeling of safety.
Totally a safe place to fall with your dad.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so funny looking back because like I know your dad was probably a little older when you were born, but my parents were like 24.
Oh my gosh.
And I look back and I'm like, no wonder they like lost their minds every now and then.
Well, and also like I felt safety with a 24-year-old.
Yes.
Like they were kids.
Right. Like, and I'm like almost double that age. I mean, not quite, but like, oh my gosh. So it's funny looking back, but that's everybody should have a home or a place to go where they feel safe. And for kids, that is home with their parents. And that's such a great example. But I feel like it would be challenging if you are the child of an influencer who is using you for content.
It obviously takes it to a different level when your family that you're living with is not your legal family, but that it is your foster family. And they make their income by being influencers and creating content. And that content includes you.
Yeah.
Every state has different laws. Every agency has different rules. There are some states where you can't post anything, any type of pictures or anything, even on a private social network. Yeah. In Florida, it's under the normalcy, which is you don't want to like hide this kid like they're not your kid. You don't want to make them feel different from the other kids, but also you don't identify them as a foster kid. You don't give any identifying information about them, and you certainly don't do it publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like a good thing to bring up because kind of like what I keep thinking is where's the line? Right. Because I definitely post about my kids like at least once or twice a month. Like I'll post some picture of something.
Like your daughter being the life of the party.
Yeah. So, like her college years are going to be terrifying. But they're not public usually. Every now and then I'm like, oh, shoot, that was public. And they certainly like those posts, I feel strongly, should not ever be about what's going on in their life, actually. Like, I'm not going to post about, like I said, potty training. It's a girl who she gave some testimony for, I think, the state legislature about creating laws that protect children. And she talked about how her first period was in a YouTube video with her mom.
Wow.
And, you know, that makes me think of other things, too. Like, and I'm not saying that I know what the line is. I think I told you earlier, like, I don't want someone taking a picture of me while I'm sleeping and posting it to Facebook.
Yeah,
you know,
we've
like
all done that with our kids.
We have.
Yeah.
And so my kids, well, they've been asking me for, like, this is why I don't post quite so much. If I take a picture before I take it, they'll be like, wait, are you going to post that? Right. So they want to have some autonomy and some control, which, you know, it's the same reason why kids are like picky eaters and won't go to sleep, you know? I feel like, and I want you to like give me your input too. I feel like pictures or videos of kids like having a fit or crying would be maybe over the line, unless it's like an infant.
I think something that makes your child embarrassed.
Yeah.
I think something that makes them feel like their privacy has been invaded. Certainly, I would not want someone talking about my first period on their social media. Like that's incredibly invasive. Regardless of, you know, any type of consent at that age, like, and that's the other thing. Like, I just don't understand, even at the age where they can maybe understand a little bit about the consent and they can certainly agree to it verbally, their brain is not developed to understand the consequences of giving that consent.
Yeah. It's kind of like giving sexual consent. Even if a 14-year-old wants to have sex, they're not of age to consent. Right. You know, it's like, I feel like it's a similar thing.
And then you have to consider, like, what are the underlying reasons for the consent being given, if it's given, right? Like, are they giving consent because they know that they'll have fancier things if their parents have more money? Are they giving consent because they want to go on a YouTube and teach people about things. I feel like that's a little different than just using their personal private life as a platform to raise money and sell things.
Right. Like allowing your whole childhood to be overshadowed by social media content.
Everybody's on social media. We're on social media. I try to keep anything that has pictures of my children on my private social medias. And then if my kids are on any of my public social medias, it will be like the back of them, or you can't necessarily see their face, or it's a video where like you can't necessarily identify them.
It's one thing to be like, this is my child. Yeah. This is my child. I'm on the birth certificate. This is my child. They make me money.
Yeah.
Like they're like a commodity, right?
Yeah.
But it's it takes it to a whole another level when this is not.
I mean, this is someone else's child in my house that has gone through trauma, because any child who's been in foster care has been through trauma, if just by the removal, you know what I mean? And so then we're going to take a traumatized child and put them in the public eye.
Right.
For what?
And in their home. So like, the home is supposed to be a safe place where you can learn and grow and have bad days. Don't all the experts say that kids will misbehave where they feel safe, right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be the safe place. All of that is overshadowed by social media. And I think that lends to other people too. Like we were talking about a well-known foster family that posts regularly, and their income, I think at least for one person, comes from TikTok. And she posted recently the biological parent doing a dance with the child and her. She's the adoptive parent. And it might have been completely consensual. It might have been the biological mom's idea. But my first thought was there like some...
Did someone feel pressure to do it because of the position they're in?
Because there is a total different... Like there's a power dynamic that you can't deny. I'm sure she wants to be involved.
There's so many possibilities for what could have driven that, right? They might just want to encourage more people to co-parent with biological parents, et cetera, which is a great thing. Listen, we're on a podcast with one of the biological parents of my previous foster kids. Yeah. We don't make a penny off our podcast, to be clear.
Yeah, we spend a penny. We don't
there's
make a
no
penny.
Financial gain. It's all money spent on snacks.
Yep.
All money spent on snacks and babysitters. I've had other parents of my foster children ask to do episodes with me, and I always tell them once the children are home and reunified and their case is closed, if they wanted to come on the podcast, that I'd love for them too. But I think that while their kids are in my home, that it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. And also, I just, want to protect everybody and all that.
That makes sense. There's an influencer that's on TikTok, and I'll say this really fast. Her name is Bobby, and I think most people, if they've been on TikTok, they've seen her. She's the one that has Richard and Concrete. That's what she calls her kids. Those are not her kids' names. She's talked about this recently because she just stopped showing her kids' faces. And what she said was she was reading through the comments, and the comments were terrible, and they were mean and ugly. And she was saying, as an adult, these are really hard for me to read, and these are my children, and I'm subjecting them to this. And she talked about how she wants her kids to have the opportunity to write their own story, and it's not her kids' job to entertain people. They should have a blank slate to enter the world with, and I completely agree with that. They should be able to choose their own digital footprint. Having a baby is not a career opportunity. Adopting a child or fostering a child is not a career opportunity, And she's not a foster parent, but I thought she had some really good things to say about how, we can go back like, I don't even know how many years ago because I'm dumb about history, but when kids were, the reason kids get out of school for the summer is so they could work on their parents' farms, and kids used to like leave school in 6th grade. People used to have children for labor.
I remember when I was a kid and my dad would be like, hey, can you go get that for me? And I'd be like, that's not my job. And he'd be like, why do you think I had kids? Or we'd do the dishes and we'd always be like, why do we have to do the dishes? And they're like, that's why we had you. Obviously he was joking, but go back a few years and that's legit.
Yeah, families were like a business. And the more kids you had, the more you could generate wealth. And so it's almost like that again with social media. Obviously not anybody can just start a YouTube and be an influencer.
In a lot of other countries, they monetize their children with dowries, right? When you go to orphanages, there are often many more boys than girls. And in this particular area, a girl would be considered more desirable because you will receive a dowry when you can marry them off. And in these other countries, countries, they can be married off much younger. So if you take care of them for a certain amount of years, then at some point you will reap some financial benefits, whether that's cows, chickens, big bags of rice. So that's kind of how children are monetized. And it's also a little sad because that's why the boys are in the orphanages at a higher rate.
That makes sense. That's really sad. And there are definitely kids and families who have important roles who kind of work in the family and they do things. Like you were talking about the dishes. Like I did the dishes every other night. My brother and I took turns,
Yes, we did.
And I was like an interpreter for my family. Like I had a lot of responsibilities. My kids do not have those responsibilities. Those things, they happen. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those things, but I do think we need to kind of identify the line between
exploitation and just being part of a family. And that's one of the, sometimes my son will be like, you know, it's not fair that I have to do things. And it's like, well, you know, you basically just spent 3 days playing video games and like eating 6 meals a day. I'm just asking you to take the trash out. And I don't think that's too much to ask at almost 13 years old. Right. But, you know, there's this line of like, how much is too much? How much is too little? You want to teach your children responsibility. I know somebody who was a grown person. The parent just did everything for this human, you know, at the ripe old age of 25, 30 years old, had the expectation of having everything done for them. I just never want my kids to be like that. Like, I want to serve my kids. I want to love on them. I want them to feel like when I make them dinner or when I do something for them or when I go in their room and organize stuff for them or clean their house or build a bed out of wood for them, I want them to feel my love through that. But also, I want them to be able to do it for themselves so that when they get older, they're not incapable. But then where's the line of having them do too much or having it be exploitation of a family? I mean, I think that is when money is brought into the equation, right?
I think so too. And like everybody should have the opportunity to have like a full cup and fulfillment every day, right? There are a few people I want to like discuss if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I just want to put this out there. There's one, and I mentioned this person earlier. I don't have their full name, but I wouldn't share anyway. It's someone who's been sharing on TikTok about her experiences as a child of an influencer, a different person than the Teen Vogue person. This person talked about how she's been on social media her entire life, which is crazy that someone can be an adult.
Yeah.
You know? But anyway, so she said a few things happened that were really scary for her. One was that she was riding her bike, and when she got home, she got a private DM from someone who said that they saw her riding her bike and that they'd followed her home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, people are crazy. Another time she had a car accident, and instead of like receiving like help from EMTs and firefighters, she had a camera in her face videoing. She said her period was detailed online when she was only 9 years old. Some other health issues were just overly exaggerated. She talks about how it's really unfair to have this digital footprint that you did not create. And I think about all the things in my childhood that I would not want to share with someone that my parents wouldn't feel any shame about, you know. Right. Thank God social media wasn't around then.
Yeah.
And there are a few other people. So this one disturbs me the most. There's a little girl on TikTok. She's 3 years old. Her mom is a stay-at-home mom, but a single mom too. And her mom's been very clear. This is how I make my income. I'm a single mom. The reason Ren is in the news so much is because she'll have like 250,000 likes and like 50,000 saves on her videos. This kind of takes it to another level that a lot of people that are commenting on the videos, they are collectors of other children's videos. And so there's a safety issue. Yeah. Right? There's a safety issue. So there's nothing that we can do about this mother who's posting these pictures online. This child is one of the reasons that I've been not posting my kids to Facebook as much or to Instagram, because I'm so disturbed that there are people out there that search the net for images of children and videos of children, and then they save them for their own personal use. Yeah. That's disturbing, right? So it just adds another element to the child.
Well, and you never know. I know this one woman who just found out that her husband has been doing these horrible things to her kids for years.
Oh my gosh.
And she lived with this person. She was married to this person. So to know that someone that could be close to you and be totally not what you think they are, right, to expect to have an understanding of the safety level of all of the people on your Facebook.
Do you really trust all these
private
people?
Or not?
Like, this is kind of new territory a little bit. And like, we got to keep our kids safe.
But then on the other side of things, it's like back in the day, people would show physical pictures of their kids all the time, right? Like you would go somewhere and there would be pictures all over someone's wall. What you do now is you post it online, and that's kind of how we connect with each other. Yeah. Because we don't connect with each other in the same ways that we used to. Yeah. It's all on the internet. But in doing that, we have to consider how that makes our children vulnerable.
Yeah. So that kind of is like a different dynamic. But I wanted to talk about that before I brought up a foster family and I mentioned them briefly earlier, but a foster family that's on TikTok that I know you know about. Yeah. And they have over 10 kids, and they have a huge presence and they make, like something like $25,000 a month from their TikTok. So it transformed their lives. It would transform anybody's lives, I think.
Right.
I have a really hard time with this one because I like them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they're pretty likable. I certainly don't know them, and I certainly don't stalk their page.
Right. I mean, from looking at their social, they look like a pretty awesome family. Like, they really love on their kids. They seem to take incredible care of them. But also,
there's 12 kids. Are they all able to? There's no way all those kids want to do it. So there's a lot of videos of like, lining them up, having them answer questions, lots of dancing videos. Her content is enjoyable.
Yeah,
it is. And there's also a time.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I really like her meal prep videos.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Like, I think it's just fun to watch. Yeah. Like, she's got like.
But she like goes down, man. Like, you remember those videos of like somebody watching someone make this perfect like bento lunch for their kids and they're like throwing
a slap of peanut butter.
Like, not even that, but like, what are those little Lunchables cookies dumping like pudding in there? I don't think I'm that bad, but I am no Martha Stewart when it comes to lunch prepping.
Yeah, I really like watching her videos. Now, I know I've sent them to you before and been like, is this realistic? Because I've never had anywhere near as many kids as she has, but you have.
Well, the meal prep or the shopping?
I think I sent you the shopping.
Right.
Because it seemed like...
To me, I mean, unless she was shopping for a month, my kids eat, man.
I know they do.
My kids eat. I've never had 12 kids. The most I've ever had was 10. Usually I have 8 kids. I think there was a period of time that I had 9 or 10, but that's because of the situation with the girls coming back into care. That wasn't on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, I would not have planned for that at all. I have had very few kids that aren't big eaters, as we know. I don't know.
You're like a 98th percentile.
Like, if you want a kid to gain some weight, bring them to my house. Like, none of my kids are overweight, like my big kids, but I can fill a baby out like nobody's business. I've got 2 babies now that were both at the doctor on Friday, and they were both 98th percentile on weight. And I was really proud of that because they didn't start out 98th percentile, but all my kids are big eaters. Like, they love to eat. I try and make like really big breakfasts any day that we're like all home really together. When I'm making breakfast like that, those probably look very similar to her meal prep. But when I saw like her grocery shopping, I'm like, dude, we eat a lot, and I have never gotten, and I've had situations where I had like multiple teens in the house and I never filled 3 grocery shopping carts in one run.
I just felt like the grocery shopping was unrealistic because I remember those days when you had 10 kids. The videos with the kids, it's like a yellow flag. Like, when I see them, I'm like, oh, they're so cute, but maybe I shouldn't know about them, especially the ones that are fosters.
And I know things are different in every state. Do you know what state they're in?
I don't remember.
I don't think I would ever feel comfortable posting a foster child video or face on a public medium.
Yeah.
That isn't private. Like, I put my foster kids all over my Facebook that's private, that only my friends can see because they're part of our family. And when we go do stuff, like, they're with us. To go to like TikTok or a public Instagram account and post your foster kids, and I feel uncomfortable with it, and I don't monetize any of that.
Yeah, no, on this particular TikTok, it's like the Von Trapps, you know what I mean? Like the singers and the matching clothes, where they're like singing for people. But it does get a little bit more concerning is probably what I mean. Like, I have concerns. So they will like line up in matching clothes and they'll do their little like, my name is whatever and I am whatever. What I definitely think is crossed the line. And I do think the lining up is crossing the line. And I also, just as a side note, I do think when you know better, you do better. If she went back today and was like, this probably isn't appropriate, I should delete. Great. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Like, but she has posted some videos, and I did notice it's been a little while, but she's posted some videos about her kids sharing the reasons they came into care, sharing their medical information, sharing like intimate details of their lives. These are very
specifically outlined as do not do's when you're a foster parent.
Their story does not belong to anybody but themselves. You're a part of it, but it only belongs to them.
Well, especially their health information. That's incredibly personal.
I feel like people are a lot better about this now, but I know like in my early days in child welfare, I'd hear people talking about the case openly with the kids in their room. Like, that mom, blah, 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 that dad. And this is when I was like a baby caseworker and didn't really have a voice, and I wish I could go back in time and speak up, but sadly I didn't, you know, but I don't feel like people do that as often. I feel like they share more privately. Like, I feel like with this family in particular, who I don't feel comfortable naming.
Yeah, because we kind of like them.
Oh, I do. Like,
my biggest issue is probably sharing their medical information and the reasons they're in care is definitely like, that's so inappropriate.
Yeah.
For me, the monetization feels icky.
It does feel icky. Yeah, your home should be a safe place. I know I keep saying that. Your home should be a safe place. And I feel like if your kid is monetized and you have a camera in their face, I feel like there need to be some firm guidelines and they're just not there. Having your information be out to the public is trauma.
Yeah.
You know, like I have my own past and my own stuff, and I don't share pieces of my personal life unless I want to. And I luckily have option to not share if I don't want to. But these kids don't have that option. All their information's out there.
And I'll say this especially because my mom does not listen to my podcast. But one of my mom's favorite things to do when I was younger was to tell her friends embarrassing stories about me. Some of the most memorable moments in my life were when I was wanting to shrink into a couch. And also because she would mix up stories between me and my sister. Whoever was there. It was like whoever was in front of her, or maybe she would pick the one who wasn't in front of her. That's the one who did it. I just remember feeling mortified. And she felt like this is my closest friend. Like, it's okay, I can tell her. And to me, it's like, but she's not my closest friend. Yeah. And that's the closest that I can relate to this because there wasn't social media at the time that I was little. My parents never exploited me or put me in a position in that way. Just remember feeling very normal kid things to do that were embarrassing to be shared with someone that I didn't feel safe with necessarily.
That's a great example. Like, I had some similar things that happened to me, not necessarily stories, but that could be a lack of like language in my home. Right. But I do remember my mom laughing at me quite a bit, like with her friends. Yeah. So like I would do something and then, and I think this is cultural, but they would all laugh at me. One of my mom's friends was like, Rose needs to put on pants. I think I was like just at the cusp of being at the age. I was wearing like a big t-shirt. I don't remember exactly what happened, but my mom kind of pointed it out and it was like them against me. And I just felt so like vulnerable and unsafe and ashamed, you know? Yeah. And I think that's really what we're talking about ultimately. I mean, kids grow and thrive in a place where they don't feel ashamed and they do feel safe. And I've definitely not been a perfect parent.
And I'm sitting here thinking about the times where like my son has said to me, oh, don't, like, I wish you hadn't said to your friend that.
That's happened to me too.
So it's definitely something that we can all learn from. And I'm sure we all screw up. We just get better
because just trying to get better.
We recognize that we suck.
Yeah. My kids have said the same thing to me. However, one of my like baselines is like, I remember I never wanted my mom to know who I had a crush on ever. Right. Ever. And once she found a note, and she's like, I saw this note, and she wanted to talk about it. And I was like, no, not a chance. And looking back, I'm like, you're not safe. Now, my mom is wonderful, gregarious, kind. She's like one of the kindest people you would ever meet. But I, you know, that's like the culture and the times. And
not that you didn't feel safe with her. That you did or that you didn't, but that you didn't feel safe being vulnerable in that way with her.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I try really hard for my kids to feel like I'm a safe person to share their crushes with or their vulnerable things. It doesn't happen always, but when it does, I'm like silently cheering because
that's awesome.
I want to be a safe person. But they've said the same thing to me before. My kids have been like, you tell your friend stuff in front of us, and that's embarrassing. Yeah. So I've been trying.
And I think, like, for me, because my mom did it in such extreme ways that I'm like, oh, I'm nothing like that. But then if I'm saying anything at all that makes you feel a certain type of way that I said it, then I should work on that. Yeah. I remember the only time I ever talked to my mom about a boy, I was probably too young to have a crush or whatever, right?
There's never too young.
I was probably in elementary school, and I told my mom I had a crush on a boy, and her response was, it's okay, you'll get over it. I was probably like in second grade, and I still remember hearing that in my head. That's okay, you'll get over it. Like, of course I'll get over it. I was in like second grade. But also, like, it was so dismissive. I'm telling you something that I feel like is important in my life right now, and I want to see if you're a safe person to share this with. And she basically told me that I'm not important enough to have something important to talk about. And that was second grade. I've never had a conversation since with my mom about any boy that I dated or had a crush on or whatever. She's had conversations with me, but I never tell her anything. And that's why when she found out I was getting married, she was so surprised because she didn't know anything about our relationship.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Like, she knew I was dating him, but she didn't know how serious we were. I don't talk to her about that ever.
Yeah.
Because when I was in second grade, she said, that's okay, you'll get over it. Yeah, as an adult, I was going to get over it. But it was just so dismissive that I just never felt that was a safe place to talk about that.
And my parents were very similar in the same way. Like, it was never like, oh, that's so exciting. Tell me about this person. It was, but I'm certain that it's because they were generation, the baby boomers, and their parents were Depression era, and it was a different time. And I'm not like faulting them. I understand, but I also don't want my kids
I'm faulting my mom.
Same.
Like, she shouldn't have said that.
Me too, to be honest.
I think that maybe that's why I'm always like, oh, tell me, do you have a crush with Jack Jr.? And he's like, oh, come on, man, leave me alone. But I want him to know I care about those things.
I like big time screwed up when my daughter was in kindergarten, and I brought up the name of her crush in front of her cousins and her aunt.
No.
And I will admit, she was 5. To me, she seemed like she belonged to me.
Yeah.
And I'm so ashamed of that now, because she's very much her own person and has been since birth.
Oh,
and
she is her own person.
Yeah. I honestly didn't even know what I did wrong, but she brought it up, and so did my son. He's like, I heard that you did that, and that wasn't okay. And it wasn't okay. Yeah. And so all this time I've been trying to make up for, because she still brings it up. She's still, whatever.
Of course she does.
Since half her life ago. One of my kids recently did tell me about a crush, and I was like, handle it right. Handle it right. I hope I did, because I remember what it feels like. Let's go right. We just need to do better.
Yeah, we don't have to be perfect. We just have to do good enough. This is circle of security. Good enough.
Yeah, and that's what I tell my oldest about turning in his work, when he's like, it's too overwhelming. I'm like, you don't have to do it right. Just turn it in. But let me tell you, you have to understand that it takes a level of desperation to get to that point. Yeah. Like, I'd rather you just turn in something.
Yeah.
Please, for the love of God, write a recipe on your homework. Just turn it in. But anyway, I do think we're doing better. I think we're in a different place. But I do think some of our parents' decisions that they made in parenting was a result of being raised by Depression era parents, which is like obvious. It's not like, I'm not like a rocket scientist. It's like, let me share my wisdom with you. But so like, I could give them some grace for that.
It's interesting how many generations you have to get past that.
Yeah.
Because when you live in, like, listen, we lived through COVID, right? Which is nothing like World War II, but felt like it for us, for our generation. And think about that we were in survival mode, right? And things have not totally gone back to how they were before, and may never will.
The world is really different.
It is. And so if that's so small on the grand scheme of things compared to World War II, where our parents were raised from parents in the middle of that, we're still trying to like get out of that survival mode parenting and grow and like try and create more mentally healthy individuals, which is really a struggle after COVID.
And COVID's probably going to affect us all our lives. Like, I was doing some research on food instability. I might have sent you what I found, but I think I did. It was talking about how anybody who's had food insecurity in their life, they're going to have, like, generally, they're going to like show signs of it. Even adults overshop for groceries if they've had food insecurity in their life. And like all those Depression era, I mean, they'd be like centurions now. Like, my grandmother was raised during the Depression. She would be 102, a lot of them had like food issues and like constantly keeping the pantry stocked. I know I babysat for a woman who lived across the street from us, and she was a foster kid, and she had so much food in her house. Of course, I was like 14 and didn't know.
Right.
She had she had enough money to buy food, but she also went to food pantries. Like, she collected food. The way the Depression impacted our grandparents and the way like World War II impacted our parents' birth. I think I didn't realize until recently how much like the internet has impacted parenting.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes right back to like, what is a child's place on the internet and what is your place?
I mean, probably not making money for you.
Yeah. I think that like follow-up conversations are necessary about like, what is the line? Where do you draw the line? Like, what is okay? And when is exploitation abuse? Because children should have the opportunity to write their own story, and they should have the opportunity to feel safe at home all the time. And I don't want anybody taking a picture of me sleeping.
I definitely do not.
There's some TikTokers that I follow. 2 men, they just had twins via surrogate, and I like love them. I'm like obsessed with their channel. And one of them posted the other day, and he's like, the most life-changing thing happened for us as parents. We never dreamed this would happen. He's like, my husband is bawling right now, and he pans to his husband, and his husband has his head in his hands, and he looks up, and he's like, turn the camera off. And I felt like really bad for his husband. You know what I mean? He was crying, So it's not just kids. And the bottom line is we're not in charge of other people. We don't own other people. However, like when people talk about how you shouldn't take pictures of people out in public, right? And then there are people that come back with that and they say, if you're out in public, you're kind of going to be on camera, you're fair game. That thought occurred to me too, as we were talking, like how much of this is just fair game? There's got to be a line. Yeah. So we got to figure out what the lines are.
And it might be custom per situation, but I definitely feel like when money's involved, it shouldn't bring the kids into the equation, and sharing health, medical information, and foster placement status is also inappropriate.
Yeah. And I feel like a foster child should never be on a public platform.
There you go.
Like private, fine, great, it's normalcy. It's not hard to find information when you want it. That is something we have discovered recently.
Have you heard of Mom.Uncharted?
Yes.
Okay, so she's been calling out influencers, asking kids as young as 1 whether they agree to be filmed and put on the internet. So she's out there doing the good work. She's doing the Lord's work.
Well, I'm really impressed with people who have come to these realizations so early, because honestly, these are kind of new realizations for me. I did stop posting my kids so much on social media when they started verbalizing that they didn't want to be on social media as much. Like if they would say, I don't put this on social media, or I don't want my picture on social media. But also I started thinking look, if I want information, I'm going to find it. I'm going to go to your mom's Facebook, your dad's Facebook, grandpa's Facebook. I'm going to go through your whole friends. You know what I mean? I started, that's when I started thinking if they have employers someday, if they have boyfriends or girlfriends someday, I don't want them to find out personal things about them on my page.
Have you heard about what they're doing in France?
No.
Okay, so France is apparently the only country in the world with regulations as far as social media content with children in it. They started a bill called, I might not be pronouncing this right, the Studer Bill, which is now taking effect in France, will mean that parents must apply for authorization before their child is allowed to appear in any monetized content, and that money will be locked away in an account.
We need to do that. That's much more responsible.
Yeah. As soon as money comes into the equation, that is child labor, and there should be regulations around that.
You know what? I know a lot of us do work at home, but you are asking a developing child to work where they rest.
But not even just work, but use their life as content.
You are entertainment for the world. Yeah. And that's not fair.
It's a long road from the days when we were kids, where parents would have their kids come in and do piano thing or whatever for their friends to show off. Now it's let me video you. I'm going to put it on the internet. I'm going to make some money. So the Studer Bill should be something that the U.S. is also considering.
I do think it's coming, because of some of the recent legislation, in California and stuff. But I don't know when it's going to be here. And definitely as foster parents and people who...
There should be no authorization for foster parents to do any monetization.
Because with the whole Brittany Dawn thing, people were asking a lot of really good questions. The money you make on this child is going to the child, right?
Yeah, that's so cute.
Is the money? You're right. I know. Do you not understand this is a scam artist?
Well, to summarize, we've got in France the Studer Bill, which requires parents to apply for permission if their child is going to appear in anything that is monetized, and that is something that is monitored. Mm-hmm. That's something that we should probably be doing here. If your child in your home that is appearing on content is in foster care, they should not be put in any content that is monetized, at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on social. We hope that you join us again next time and keep on fostering the future.